Welcome into the Pulse, where we talk about all things people, power, and politics. And politics front and center on a lot of people's minds right now as the election gets so much closer. The candidates in all races ramping up their efforts to earn your vote. And last night, Elissa and Mike Rogers said their pieces on everything from immigration to electric vehicles. We'll be breaking down that debate in just a second here. We're also talking about those political ads we're all seeing all the time and how they could be instilling fear in people. But does fear work? We'll have a panel talking about that as well. First, though, as Florida deals with Hurricane Milton making landfall tonight, the storm could deplete the National Flood Insurance Program. That's according to Politico. Lawmakers and other staffers believe that between Milton and Hurricane Helene that just passed, the $5 billion in the fund will be exhausted, causing nearly $10 billion to be borrowed from the Treasury. Some say this could just force Congress to raise its borrowing cap. And as the South deals with the devastating hurricanes, FEMA is working overtime to try to organize and distribute all kinds of emergency aid that's needed out of these boxes into people's homes and into places where they're sheltering. And they're trying also to dispel information, or misinformation rather, about the agency's response efforts and policies. Some of the false claims include disaster relief money being diverted to migrants and property being confiscated from homeowners. In fact, some rumors and conspiracies spread so quickly on where? Social media, that FEMA had to launch a fact-checking website to combat all of that chatter on our phones. You know, this week marks 1 year since the deadly attack on Israel by Hamas. We talked about that, of course, earlier in the week. And today, President Joe Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had their first call in 7 weeks. Vice President Kamala Harris was also on that 30-minute call. This comes as Israel's conflict with Iran and Hezbollah and Lebanon continues to get worse. According to the White House, the conversation was, quote, direct and what they called positive. And while that call was positive, Israeli defense forces continue battering northern Gaza with airstrikes like these, while also expanding a week-long ground offensive against Hezbollah in Lebanon. And in a sign of the so-called diplomatic tightrope the administration is walking with Israel, the State Department also made it really clear today it supports Lebanon's autonomy.
We cannot and must not see the situation in Lebanon turn into anything like the situation in Gaza. No country in the region should dictate to the Lebanese people who their leaders are. Not Israel, not the United States.
Tonight, Israeli military officials also say they are plotting a response to a massive missile attack from Iran last week. And you know how unpredictable and frankly unsettling the world is right now. So we take you now from the Middle East to Korea, where tensions are actually rising there tonight. You see, the North is now permanently blocking its territory from South Korea by cutting off all roads and railways. And leader Kim Jong-un is threatening to use nuclear force if his country's enemies try to use armed forces against them. It's in response to what the North considers provocations by South Korea and the U.S., citing joint military exercises. But Seoul officials say the North has actually been building up the side of its border for months with anti-tank barriers and mines in a likely attempt to prevent troops and citizens from defecting. Tensions in Korea have been rising now for months, with the North sending trash-carrying balloons across the border and Seoul blasting daily anti-North Korean propaganda broadcasts. Experts warn the North could actually ramp up hostilities ahead of the U.S. presidential election. Well, Donald Trump visited Pennsylvania this afternoon. It is his 7th stop in that state just this month. And today, he was in President Biden's hometown of Scranton, where he criticized Biden's handling of storm cleanup and also talked about the importance of Trump getting back into the White House. Here's what he said.
If we win Pennsylvania, we win the whole thing. It's very simple. We just rented Madison Square Garden. We're going to make a play. We're going to make a play for New York. Hasn't been done in a long time. It hasn't been done in many decades, but we're going to make, how could New York be run worse than it is, right? With all the problem, everything is corrupt in New York, and we're going to make a play.
Now, a recent Fox News poll indicates Kamala Harris has a slight 2-point edge over Trump in Pennsylvania. His visit to that state comes ahead of his trip to Michigan tomorrow, where he'll be speaking at the Detroit Economic Club over at the Soundboard. Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, was campaigning in Arizona today. He spoke to voters in Tucson on things like border control and inflation. He also asked any supporters of his who pray to do so, of course, as Florida deals with the severe weather coming its way once again. In the meantime, Kamala Harris's running mate Tim Walz was also in Arizona today. He took part in a veterans and military event in Phoenix alongside the son of late GOP Senator John McCain. The visits by the vice presidential candidates come the same day that early voting kicked off in that state. And when it comes to the Electoral College, Walz says it's got to go. He made those remarks last night while at a fundraiser at California Governor Gavin Newsom's house, saying, quote, "We need a popular vote, but that's not the world we live in." Now, last year, as governor of Minnesota, Walz signed the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. It basically was an agreement in which each state would allocate all of its electoral votes to whoever wins the popular vote for president, regardless of how individual states voted. You know, the Pulse, of course, is the day's news. It's people, it's power, it's politics, but it's also a chance to learn about how things work. For those who skipped out on this day of high school, we got you covered here tonight. A little review for you. The Electoral College was created by the Founding Fathers in the Constitution. Now, the idea was to make sure larger states didn't wield too much power in presidential elections. In recent years, many Democrats have called for the elimination of the college, using examples like the 2016 election when Hillary Clinton won the popular vote but received fewer electoral votes. On the other side of the aisle, though, many Republicans have said no to dropping the college, saying the move would result in states with bigger populations having way too much influence. Candidates need 270 electoral votes to win that presidency. So we've heard what some of the politicians think, but this show is all about you, and we wanted to hear from you. I asked you on social media, and here's what some of you had to say. This one coming from Jeff. He tells me, one person, one vote. Jeff Irwin, you may know him, of course, a famous, popular lawmaker. There's no good reason that some votes count for more than others. But Sangeet had this to say, Sangeet writing into the Pulse, keep the Electoral College. It represents the whole country and not just the East Coast and West Coast. And apparently you got a little love for that. But here's what the account, gotta delete something, had to say, quote, absolutely, every vote should be equal and the winner of the popular vote should win the office. The EC, the Electoral College, was designed for a much smaller and different country than the one that actually exists today. And finally, you know, a lot of people watch the Pulse and watch our Twitter account. Congressman John James sent this to us just earlier this evening, saying extreme Democrats like Carl Marlinga want to rip out portions of the Constitution that they find inconvenient and then turn around and call Republicans a threat to democracy. They want to talk about voting rights and then disenfranchise millions in small states or flyover states, as coastal elites would say, about Michigan. We thank you, the congressman, for chiming in here today. And by the way, for those of you asking why we're asking about it, simple. It's a topic this time every year and every election cycle. We always want to hear your thoughts. We also put the question on our website, fox2detroit.com. A pretty close vote, as you can see by the results right now, but now it's leaning much more towards the no, with 61% saying no. If you'd like to chime in and share your thoughts, you know what to do. Take your phone right now, scan that QR code at the bottom right of your screen, and it'll take you right to the vote. We'd love to hear from you. Still ahead here on the Pulse, Elissa and Mike Rogers going head-to-head, trying to get your vote from Michigan Senate. Up next, we're sitting down with a Republican and Democrat who you know well to see how they think the candidates fared in this week's debate. You're watching the Pulse on Fox 2. All right, my friends, welcome back to the Pulse. Michigan set to elect a new senator next month. Yeah, that's an election that's happening too, not just the presidential race. Its seat, of course, being left by outgoing Democratic Senator Debbie Stabenow, who's not seeking re-election. Last night, the candidates Elissa and Mike Rogers talked about a number of issues during the debate, broadcast out of Grand Rapids, out of Beer City. So who won the debate? Democratic Congresswoman Haley Stevens and Republican Rocky Rutschkowski probably have very different ideas about this. And that's why we thank you both for joining us. It's always good to see you on the Pulse.
Well, I can tell you who won that baseball game.
We knew that.
Tigers.
Listen, I was going to say, there's no red or blue when it comes to these Detroit Tigers and our Lions. I mean, you're sitting in stands with people who probably diametrically oppose you politically, but we're all on the same page.
100%.
Go Tigers. All right, but we're going to split a little bit when it comes to politics, especially with this debate last night. Rocky, I'll begin with you. What did you think? Who won this debate last night?
Well, taking politics completely out of it, let me just stick to the facts. Mike Rogers.
Why?
Simple. He stuck to the issues, and he's got a Michigan aura to him. He was born, raised here. He lived his entire life here. He represented here. He worked here. Mike Rogers is Michigan. When you look at Elissa Slotkin, who spent most of her life outside of Michigan, You know, and then to claim that Mike Rogers lives in Florida. Yeah, he's got a place in Florida, but he's building a beautiful house in White Lake in Oakland County. He's got Michigan values, and he will represent Michigan a lot better than Elissa Slotkin, because number one, he never lied on EVs. He stands on the right side of the issue on the economy for Michigan, and he stands on the right side of the issue that Michigan is concerned about the border.
All right, Congresswoman Haley Stevens, you have a different idea about who may have won this debate, but to take a little bit of what Rocky just said, do you think Elissa Slotkin embodies the Michigan, I guess the values and the kind of the traits?
I think Elissa Slotkin has a plan for Michigan, and she has a proven track record of delivery. And in fact, no one can do what Elissa Slotkin can do, which is bring people together, come up with solutions, and accomplish. She's done that time and time again, living in Holly, representing a very middle-of-the-road district. I have witnessed her as her colleague on the House floor working on tough issues, things like border security, which is obviously very touchy, but she's willing to step up, take a stand, bring her expertise to the forefront. She's also crystal clear about an issue that is really important to Michiganders, and that's health care. If it is protections for pre-existing conditions, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, which she helped champion in-house.
But her mom, I mean, she's dealt with this as a personal thing.
It's very personal for her.
But she has made some inroads and done a lot on that. I think objectively speaking, Rocky, you'd agree that she has done a lot.
Objectively speaking, she has, but it's been on the wrong side of the fence of Michigan.
No, but it's been a losing issue for Republicans.
I'd really like to know what she has truly accomplished. When you talk about border security, talking about being strong on the border sounds great in an election year, but look at her voting record. Her voting record supported exactly what the Biden-Harris administration did, and that is weaken our border for 3.5 years. And it's great to talk about it now because it's an issue now, but it's only Mike Rogers.
And it was a problem under Trump.
No.
It was a problem under Trump. I mean, we had a caravan coming 6 years ago. Nothing. We separated families.
In fairness, he didn't fix it. He built 2% of the wall and said Mexico would pay for it.
And guess
Both
what?
of those things didn't happen.
Lowest border crossings ever, and he was further continuing on and stopping the border crossings.
The border is a crisis, and I think anyone who argues that has all kinds of strange goggles on. But let me ask you this. Let's talk about money, the economy. We'll get to the border in a minute. Let's hear right from these two candidates, in case you missed the debate, about what they had to say about the economy. Take a listen.
Here's the things that I would do. We have to absolutely become energy independent. I'm for an all of the above policy, but if we don't get gas prices down, we won't get food prices down. There is no sense from buying oil from Venezuela when we have capability here in this country. Regulation has to stop. $1.6 trillion in new regulation coming out of Washington, D.C. And lastly, spending. We have got to get our arms around spending.
For me, there's really three things that I've been working on doing that I believe in. Number one is bringing supply chains back home from places like China. That includes the 44 manufacturing facilities that are being built right now in the state of Michigan. You need a good job with good benefits. Number two, it's attacking the primary costs that are just burning a hole in people's pockets. Healthcare, prescription drugs. We finally allowed Medicare to negotiate drug prices. You've got to bring down costs like housing, childcare. And then number three, you got to keep more money in your pocket that you earn, right? Taxes and tax policy. You got to do things like the Earned Child Tax Credit. Give credit to middle-class families instead of breaks to the ultra-wealthy.
All right, bottom line here, my friends, we shoot down the middle on this show. We're going to criticize both sides for trying to handle the border and not being able to do it, Trump and also Harris. Let's talk about money, though. Rogers said, Congresswoman Stevens, inflation is your fault. It is policy by Democrats like you, overspending $1.7 trillion here, $1.3 trillion here. That's what drives up inflation. What is your response to that?
But the right-leaning Cato Institute has shown that the tariffs that Trump put into place before COVID hit increased the cost of consumer goods. The Detroit News just published a poll. 65% of Michiganders don't buy Trump's tariff plan as a solution to exclusive solution to tackling China. What Elissa Slotkin is talking about, what we have worked on in the Congress, is proven strategic industrial policy, co-investments. You're right, $50 billion for chips manufacturing group. Rocky, it's a bipartisan bill. $50 billion that met $200 billion in private capital contributions.
Congresswoman, hold on 1 second. But do you think the Democrats are simply spending way too much money, open checkbook, and that's what led to the inflationary period that we're going to fight?
I think the Democrats rescued the economy, and that's why Michigan's economy is booming, and that's why economists after don't roll your eyes at that. Detroit's got its lowest levels of unemployment in 50 years.
It's not rolling your eyes.
We've got record employment in Michigan right now.
All right, let's talk about Mike. We have about a minute left.
Thank you, Whitmer.
It's not thank you them. It's thank you employers, and it's thank you the fact that we got out of COVID. The economy went down because of COVID, went back up, and then now you've got inflation, and you've got jobs that are being cut by General Motors. You cannot say thank you, Democrats.
We talked about inflation. Let's talk about. We got to zoom out here. Mike Rogers, you kind of characterize Elissa Slotkin as a career politician. You could say, well, somebody spent a lot of time in Washington.
Yeah.
Mike Rogers has spent a heck of a lot of time outside of Michigan as well. Do you think that Michiganders realize that and have a problem with that? Both Florida and Washington.
Yeah, but he's also spent majority of his life in Michigan. But that's not the issue here.
No, it is an issue. People care about that.
Yeah, of course. Then if they do care about it, they'll vote for Mike Rogers. It's plain and simple. Instead of somebody that parachuted back to run for a congressional seat that George Soros bought for her. What we're looking at right now when we talk about the economy, because that's the #1 issue. Let's stick to that. You heard those sound bites of Mike Rogers giving you specific points, making sure that we've got more energy production to lower energy costs. When you lower energy costs, you have prices that go down. You control strength. You control the spending in government. What we haven't seen, what you heard from Elissa Slotkin was, we need to do this, we need to do that, but she didn't provide a plan. And when I hear Haley, and God bless you, Haley, but when I hear you talk about co-investments don't work when you work with China.
Hold on. Last word, Congresswoman Stevens, last word to you. We got to go to break here, but I want to give you an opportunity to respond to that in like 20 seconds.
I'm talking about public-private partnerships, which work, not shutting down the government, which is what we inherited from a Republican supermajority when Elissa and I. It cost $80 billion. I mean, to shut down the government, doing a CHIPS bill, which Democrats and Republicans did together.
CHIPS bill is something that everybody agreed on.
Well,
not everybody.
Everybody agreed on.
Many people did, and at this point, look, we got to wrap this conversation up as we head closer to the election.
Biden's bill.
I invite both of you to come back on the show because your opinions matter to us here. Rocky,
we get along.
Congresswoman Stevens, you got along fine in the green room. I don't know what happened to you.
We get along outside of politics.
Still ahead on the pulse. Those political ads we're seeing, some of them can be a little bit scary from both sides. We're talking about fear in the election commercials on the other side of these commercials. We'll be right back. Thank you, Rocky. Thank you, Congresswoman. Yay. Good to see you both. Cheers. All right, welcome back to The Pulse, the show covering everything people, power, and politics from the D to D.C. We are less than a month to the election, and you've been bombarded with political ads running on TV, online, and on the radio, on your social media. Some of them can be not a bit, but all the way fear-inducing. Joining us now to talk about fear, Dave Dulio, political science expert from Oakland University and a regular here on The Pulse. Good to see you, Dave. Thanks for joining us. You scared yet? I mean, because if you're a Democrat and you're watching an ad from the Trump camp or a PAC, you'll be scared, because if I vote the wrong way, I could screw over my entire life, is the way to make it seem. And the opposite true as well. Does fear work?
Sure does. They wouldn't use it if it didn't work. You know, it's not only does it work, it's been around for a long time. The use of images, audio that pull at your emotions is a tried and true method in American politics. And, you know, we can go back not just to the 90s, not just to the 80s. We can go back to the 1860s and the 1860 election with Abraham Lincoln and see the use of fear in images, frankly, that would never fly today because they had to do with race and ethnicity in ways that we would never stand for today. Just absolutely, just straight up racist, straight up ethnocentric appeals that played to people's emotions and fears.
So this has been around since the beginning of politics. Let's talk for a moment about how it's ramped up, though, because if you look at, you know, like Dukakis Bush, or you look at, you know, all that stuff from way back when, and then you take a look at where we're at now, it feels like they're proposing, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, that there's an existential threat, that if you vote for this other person, the way you know America will end. Is that's on purpose, right? I mean, that's how they're framing these messages.
It's certainly on purpose, and it's done to try and make sure people listen, right? It's because as you know, right, there's so much out there now. There's so much clutter. There's so much political swirl that to get an effective message through to voters, you have to cut through that, and using fear is a tried and true method for doing that.
And so it's one thing to say, like people say all the time, I want to see more good things. I wish there was more positive messaging. But if positive messaging was so darn effective, they'd be using more positive messaging. That inspirational music saying, this candidate has done more, and the American flag waving in the back, people don't remember those, right, as much.
You couldn't be more right. And in fact, we've got reams of data over decades that demonstrate that those positive commercials compared to negative ones are not as well remembered and frankly don't carry as much policy content as the quote-unquote negative ads.
Talk about how that translates into the rallies. We often say with Kamala Harris in one interview and then at a rally we hear something different. We hear Donald Trump contrast the rally Donald Trump to the one who sits down and does a debate or stands up and does a debate. How important is consistency, or is it not important?
Well, it used to be that consistency in message was absolutely critical, that you couldn't get caught as a candidate saying one thing to one audience and another thing to a different audience, right? But these days, because the base of each party is so critical to the electoral fortunes of that party, the message to the base is often different than the one that is communicated to swing voters, independent voters, et cetera.
It is actually deep enough that mental health therapists talk about it, and we had the chance to talk to one just a few moments ago, and here's what she had to say about fear in these ads and your children.
Not only are they watching that literal ads or hearing them on the morning drive to school or after school, they're also feeling the energy of the parents. And a lot of us, myself included, it's really really focused on this campaign. We're really eyes on the prize of things. And so that creates anxiety. Like, why is mom or dad, why is my caregiver having the feelings that they're experiencing? Why are they so revved up about these things? And so the thing I would tell parents and caregivers is to pay attention and be mindful and have conversations. It's never too early to talk to your children really about anything, but also about our democracy, and share with them what is happening in the world, and why voting is so important and so important to you personally and the family.
So we tap into the political science professor's expertise to look for a little bit of psychology for a moment, if you will. What do you think all of us can do as a collective to make things a little bit easier and better for one another?
Yeah, I think that was great advice. Have conversations about it. I'd also say, take a step back. Realize what is happening when you're watching these commercials. Know that they're trying to pull at your heartstrings. Know that they're trying to impact your emotions, and take it with a grain of salt, right? Step back. It'll be okay.
Be a smart consumer. It will be okay. Right. 3 great words from Dave Dulio. And regardless of who wins, we of course wish for that, and we thank you for joining us here on The Pulse. We'll be talking to you much more through this cycle here. Now, by the way, Battleground with SC Cup is next, right here on Fox 2. A great show looking at the other swing states. I'm Roop Raj. Have a great night. Great work, man. Yeah, did a good job.